welcome to this presentation. First of all, I'd like to make a disclaimer. I'm not a doctor. Everything which I'm going to say is not medical advice. Everything I'm saying is purely as my own perspective, which I'm sharing with anyone who is interested. This is a quote by Rudolf Steiner. In times when there were no electrical currents, when air was not swarming with electrical influences, it was easier to be human. For this reason, in order to be human today, we need to have much stronger spiritual capacity than 100 years ago. I think that this quote fits very well today's context. This is a little bit of a precondition for understanding how this works. So, what is neuroplasticity? Neuroplasticity is how we adjust to the environment. Usually, they say that only children have neuroplasticity, and that once we grow up, we don't have neuroplasticity anymore because we already have supposedly all the answers and we think we know how things should work. We have some kind of algorithm and we just follow it. So we don't need to study more things than we already know. When a child is born, it has so many pressures because the child has to survive and he did not learn how to survive. The child either has to figure it out or die. So it is a matter of life and death for a child. The signals that the child is getting from the parents is that you you're going to be a good boy, you're going to be a good girl, and then everything will be fine. Then we will love you. If you're not going to do the right thing, if you don't behave properly, we're not going to love you. And if we don't love you, then you're finished. This is the message we get from the parents. I'm exaggerating it a little bit, but more or less, this is the perspective of a child when the child gets into this world. Children have very high neuroplasticity. If they didn't, they would just wouldn't be able to survive. They wouldn't be able to learn, and if they wouldn't be able to learn, that's death. Adults are already established in the way they think. They already have their own patterns, but they do not want to change because they have suffered a lot as a children in order to learn those patterns. Because as children, they learn that doing whatever they considered to be the right thing was the way to actually survive, which means that you must not change any of that stuff because that's how you are still alive, which means that as adults we don't normally change our underlying belief system, we don't change our underlying ideas because we are afraid that this is going to kill us. Since we've held those ideas until today, we're still alive. Works as a proof that whatever we've been doing until now, and if we're still alive, it means that we should be right in some way. But adults still learn. So as we can see, they learn when they are learning something new, much more difficult for adults than children. They learn when there's a change in the environment. When you move to a new country or a new city, you have to learn what's going on here. So that's neuroplasticity. That's why people who do more of this, they have higher level of neuroplasticity. Practicing means that if we do something over and over again, we create new neural patterns. If we practice waking up at a specific time, if we practice meditation, if we practice doing asanas, then we get specific connections in our brain, and that gets into long-term habit. Coping with psychological stress. That's also when we have to develop neuroplasticity, because if we get into some conflict, if we get into some situation which creates pain, that's a signal for the brain that we need to do something, we need to adjust, we need to establish some new neural connections. So that again triggers neuroplasticity, which normally when we're comfortable, we don't need neuroplasticity. Neuroscientists originally thought that only children have it, but then they realized that, yeah, actually adults have it too, and we actually keep creating new connections and new brain patterns, but much slower and much less compared to children. I see a smiling face, I'm feeling more relaxed, I'm feeling positive. If somebody shouts or if somebody starts cursing, that's also a specific neural connection. And that connection would be linked to some specific picture or to some specific sensation. Meditation rewires the brain to allow negative feelings and unpleasant perceptions to be digested and transformed. So this is one example when we apply neuroplasticity. If we do get thirsty, that's already a sign that damage has been done to the body. Thirst is a critical signal, which means that we need to urgently fix the situation. So a healthy approach is to drink before we feel thirsty. In Tibetan medicine, they say the first thing you take in the morning has triple effect. So if it's something good, it's three times more beneficial for the body. If it's something bad, it's going to be three times more damaging to your body. And therefore, if the first thing in the morning you drink is 2 or 3 cups of water, that is going to have a very positive effect on your body. Masaru Emoto, he was a Japanese researcher who looked into how mind and thought and vibration affects the water. So he explains that here on the left, here you can see uh, the structure of the water when you create the vibration of love and encouragement. And here on the right is the structure of the water when you create the vibration of hate, anger, and criticism. By the time you feel thirsty, you're already dehydrated. Just drinking half to 1 liter or more in the morning makes a big change for the way you feel and also for your body. How much water do we need? Healthy people need to drink 1.1 to 1.5 liters of water. If you have some disease, like a mild disease, medium, not very severe disease, you need to drink probably 2 or more, and severe diseases even more. Next one, cold versus lukewarm. So should it be hot or should it be cold? Uh, this will depend on the body type. If you have too much heat in your body, cold water is fine. If you have too much cold in the body, which is the case with the majority of people, if you have too much cold, you need to drink boiled water and preferably warm. You'll notice that you'll be sweating after you drink a couple of cups, which is great because that will help detox. So that's a cheap, easy detox we can do every day. To allow the water to settle down, which means to let the water stay for a while, like for several hours or for half a day before we drink it, so that it gets a little bit restructured after it travels through all of those pipes. Cold water is not recommended because this is damaging the kidney, and the kidney is the storage of life energy. In Eastern medicine, uh, cold water is considered pretty bad, specifically because of this, because cold water disturbs the balance of heat and cold in the organism. This is the cheapest, best way to detox every day. If we swim in the water, it emotionally makes us feel better. If parents swim with children in the water, that improves the family connections, so improves bonding. Contact with water improves mood. Hot baths will relax your body and help eliminate toxins. Taking a hot bath is another very great way of detoxing. Doing more than 15 minutes in hot water is going to deplete some of your energy. Known to improve acne, arthritis, asthma, back problems, colds, constipation, coughs, cramps, digestive problems, flu, food poisoning, headaches, infection, insomnia, nervousness, sinuses, and sore throats. Food is a heat and cold regulator in both in Ayurveda and Chinese, Tibetan medicine. Food always has the specific qualities, and the qualities could be cold, hot, oily, dry. Using a refrigerator for the ingredients to store vegetables, that's fine. But a lot of people actually cook the food, and whatever is left over, they just throw into the fridge, and then they reheat it and eat it later. And that's actually quite bad for the health, and it damages both the liver because the food becomes more toxic. just just in about over 6 hours, it already loses uh, part of the nutrition, and some toxins starts to form inside the food. So yesterday's food is not healthy. Trying to eat freshly cooked food is the best. Carbs, fats, and proteins. A lot of people are overeating on carbohydrates, and specifically on fast carbs. Fast carbs are, first of all, the refined wheat. So anything made of wheat comes under fast carbs, and sugars. In terms of energy, they are very much like trying to heat ourselves in the winter with newspapers. These newspapers burn very quickly. They create a lot of energy, but it only lasts for a couple of minutes. And why is this good? This is good because supermarkets can keep selling more and more and more. Why is this bad for us? Because we don't need that much carbohydrates. Even if we don't, even if we actively avoid carbohydrates, we would still eat carbohydrates because it's impossible. We will always get our share of carbs. What we can do is switch from fast carbs to slow carbs, which would be whole meal grains, which would be some vegetables, pretty much most of the vegetables, but depends. Because, for example, potato, it probably be more in the fast carbs category. So slow carbs, they take longer time to digest. Fast carbs, because since they generate a lot of energy, that automatically makes the insulin go up. Insulin is a good thing. There's nothing bad in insulin. Insulin is just a communication mechanism our body is using. So whenever the insulin goes high, that's a signal for our body to store energy. That's what insulin means. We have too much energy, and we need to store that energy so that we can use it during the winter when there will be no food. So our bodies by nature have been designed to eat as much as we can whenever we have food, because today we have food, tomorrow we might not have food. So because tomorrow we might not have food, we've been programmed that whatever I can eat, I should eat, because maybe tomorrow that I won't be able to find food. As a result, the body was pre-programmed to store any excess energy. If I'm overcharging my phone, the phone says, "Oh, I have more electricity than I actually need. So let's connect some extra batteries so that I can store that energy in the form of fat." That's how insulin works. And with slow carbs, we're still getting a little bit of increase of insulin, but we don't get a very high increase of insulin, which means that we are slowly digesting it. So there's no sharp spike in the insulin. And that's much better also because it lasts for longer time. So it means we can have a meal and we won't be hungry in 2 hours. Whereas if we eat fast carbohydrates, that means that I had a breakfast 2 3 hours ago. Now I'm hungry again. By nature, we're designed to always go from full to empty. And the body is designed that when we are empty, the body says, okay, there's no food. Now I can actually use those batteries which where I stored all the extra energy, which is fat. Usually it takes 12 to 20 to from 12 to 2 days for the glucose from the bloodstream to actually get used up. And then once we hit that point, the body switches to ketosis mode, which means that the body, instead of burning the food from the outside, the body switches to eating its own reserves. We've been designed like this. We've been designed that today is June. I have enough food, so I can eat as much as I can. But then in December, there won't be any food because there's no supermarket around the corner, and I might not be able to find food. And that's exactly when the body is using up all of those reserves. And from my experience, one day of fasting, for me, for example, is not always enough, because that's not enough to burn all of the glycogen and the glucose, and that's not enough for the body to switch into ketosis mode when all of the fat can actually be accessed. Because the whole point of the ketosis diet is to get to the point when we burn all of the glycogen in the body, which is short-term energy, and only then we can tap into the long-term storage. What does this mean? This actually means that all the people that you see running and jogging outside, who are convinced that by going to the gym and by doing very hard exercise, they're convinced that they would lose weight. They do not lose weight. They burn the sugar from the body, but they never get to actually burn the fat, because in order to start burning fat, you need to switch into ketosis mode. And depending on how much sugar and carbs you eat, that can take up to 3 days. It doesn't really matter how much exercise and jogging we do. We're not going to lose weight, because all of that exercise is only going to burn the sugar and glycogen. The whole idea, which is called calories in, calories out, it just doesn't work. And that's exactly what Dr. Fung, a Canadian doctor, he wrote a book called Complete Guide to Fasting, and he explains the biology of these processes. So the unfortunately, all of these people who think they have to do heavy sports in order to lose weight, they are misguided. And they are misguided by the modern medicine, which is pretty much in collaboration with the big food, because big food is, in a way, similar to big pharma nowadays. They are paying and financing research, which comes up with recommendations like you have to eat every 2 hours if you want to be healthy. That's the proper way to maintain your body health, which goes completely against the way our body works. Our body needs to have a break, because it's only during that break between meals that the body can enter maintenance mode. And this is a very important key issue here, because if we do not allow the body to enter maintenance work, then the body can never get rid of all the toxins which have been generated during the digestion process. Which means that if we eat too often, just in matter of years, we'll get to the point where our bodies will be fully poisoned, because we won't give the body enough maintenance window. And this is a key issue which modern medicine is just refusing to acknowledge, because this goes against the big food companies. They do not want people to know about this, and they want people to just keep buying the meds. They want people to just keep buying pills and going to the doctor. So it's according to Dr. Fung, 50 years ago, most people had 2 to 3 meals per day, and they were much healthier. Nowadays, most people eat 5 to 7, but that's North America. So I'd expect that in Europe it would not be the same, but people still eat more often than 2 or 3 times a day. Our ancestors, which were, let's say, supposedly lived in the caves, they did not have supermarkets around the corner. So what happened? They went out searching for food today. They found food. Everybody's happy. They ate as much as they could. The whole family happy. Tomorrow, they didn't find anything. Or the next day, day after tomorrow, there's only snow and no food. So what happens? Do they just die? No, not at all. The body gets into the mode where growth hormones just shoot up, which means that the body gets into the mode when it starts actively regenerating itself, and it starts growing new cells, which is very important. We need that. We grow new cells when we fast. Moreover, when we fast, the first thing that the body attacks are diseased cells, are bad tissues, are degenerated cells. So wherever there is something wrong, that's the first place where that the body eats up. So the body basically burns everything which is not healthy. And what happens when somebody stops eating? Nowadays, whenever people don't eat for more than 5, 6, 7 hours, they say, "I have a headache. I I'm I'm feeling so weak. It's probably I need more nutrition." So people believe that they just don't have nutrition and they must urgently solve this problem because I'm feeling weak and my head is going funny. What they're actually experiencing are symptoms of poisoning, because what's actually happening to the body is going into maintenance mode, and it starts doing a house cleaning, and the body starts moving the sofa, and there's a lot of dust under the sofa, and this all goes up, and people say, "Oh, I don't feel well. Of course, they don't feel well because they never do that cleaning. Because if you keep eating often, you're never allowing the body to actually do any of that maintenance and to start actually eliminating. I do recommend Jason Fung's book. Also, Jason Fung has a whole bunch of videos on YouTube. If you just Google intermittent fasting, Jason Fung, you'll find a lot of very, very good and useful materials. A short overview of additives, especially for vegetarians, because as vegetarians, we know that we need, for example, B12, which we're not normally getting with vegetables. I'll go over one by one. Ginger, it has uh, warm properties, and since most people have problems with too much cold, ginger is very indicated. And many people have ginger, but not many know how to actually use it, because it's like, so how do I use it? Should I just cut it and eat it? Because that kind of doesn't make sense. It actually makes the food much tastier if you throw it into whatever you're cooking. And if you put it into your food closer to the end, it will have a more spicy taste. And if you don't like spicy, you can just put it at the beginning. It won't be that spicy. Ginger is also a great anti-inflammatory. Same goes for turmeric. Turmeric is actually medically recognized a remedy for inflammation. Wanted to mention cordyceps. This is a Chinese traditional medicine remedy, which is a very specific type of fungus, and it is considered to be one of the most potent natural immunity boosters. In China, hundreds of years ago, regular people were not allowed to collect it, and because it was exclusively only for the royal family. And if somebody was found to be picking it without the authorization, the punishment was death. Today, they've managed to isolate the active ingredient, and you can buy it relatively cheap. Just ask for it uh, at your local health store. Ginseng, another great root, which is an immunity booster, but it also is very effective in removing and detoxing the body. Polyphenols that we find in typically in fruits, and they're very important to maintain a healthy body. So polyphenols help in keeping the cells healthy. One source of polyphenols are the cloves, the the classic condiment that everybody has in the kitchen. Another source of polyphenols is pomegranate, which is also very rich in antioxidants. In Tibetan medicine, pomegranate is called the king of fruits because because it has some outstanding properties, including in purifying the body and restoring the balance. Chlorella and spirulina, these two are very important for vegetarians because they both contain almost all of the B group vitamins, and chlorella contains B12, the active form of B12, which we can actually use. Spirulina also contains B12, but it's the inactive form, so it doesn't really help. But obviously, it has other B vitamins. Amla is a main ingredient in Chyawanprash. Chyawanprash is a Indian traditional remedy which usually moms give to children in India whenever they have coughs or anything. It's just like a cure-all medicine. And amla is the active ingredient in Chyawanprash. It's the main ingredient, and you might be able to find it in a health store near you. It's very rich in polyphenols and antioxidants, which means that it also helps a lot with detoxing. Baba's medicine, antiviral tonic. I was told by a sister from New York City that she used this to treat COVID. Described it during an outbreak in Munger. Half a glass of half glass of water, lukewarm water, 1.5 spoons of honey, turmeric, and 15 drops of fresh lemon. People actually managed to treat COVID with this. Metals are a huge thing nowadays because they are everywhere, and they have been identified as a major cause of cancer and disease. Actually, a lot of disease, both neurological and functional, a lot of developmental and blood pressure, including lung cancer. And that's according to, if you go to PubMed, the biggest resource for medical research. So anything which has been peer reviewed and all the medical research can be found there. So metals also amplify damage caused by EMF radiation, because if we have metal in the body, that means that whatever EMF radiation we have around, that will affect us even more. So that's another reason why it's very important to detox, because today this detoxing is not a luxury. Today detoxing is a necessity. It's a, I would say that this is a necessity, at least in order to be able to have a clear mind, probably. This is actually a huge topic. Is milk addictive? Let's look at the research. The addictive effects of cheese are due to large amounts of protein casein, which is present in milk but is much higher in cheese because of how it's made. Casein activates the opioid system. Casein activates the pleasure center in the brain. So when people say, I love cheese, it's because there's a chemical explanation for this. Because cheese does induce pleasure and milk does induce pleasure. There's actually a explanation. As babies, we are supposed to survive by our mother's milk. So Mother Nature used this trick. Mother Nature made the milk a little bit sweet. It also, Mother Nature added this protein into the. Of course, it's not the same as crack or cocaine, but it does tickle more or less the same brain centers as recreational drugs or alcohol. According to Jason Fung, refined carbohydrates also tickle the same brain receptors as the ones which are activated through alcohol. Here's a link to Dr. McDougall, who has a lecture called Marketing Milk and Disease, where he explains the result of his studies. And here's a quick overview of what he found. So milk is very high in cholesterol, pretty much like meat, which causes rotten arteries, a risk factor for atherosclerosis, strokes, and heart attacks. Milk has no fiber. That creates constipation. Very high calorie and high fat profile. High fat possible promoters of obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. High protein is good when we are hungry and when we don't have any other sources of protein. But if let's even take India, because in India, milk is part of the culture. But does it mean that 100 to 100 years ago, historically, does it mean that they They were drinking milk on a daily basis as much as they could? Of course not. Milk was one source of protein because especially when you don't have any other sources of protein, then anything goes. So as a source of protein, when you need to feed the children, that's fine. But when you have it available every day in any quantities, and as I mentioned, we are built in this way that whenever we have food, our body is programmed to eat as much as we can because deep in the subconscious, our biology says, eat now, because tomorrow, or maybe in a week, or maybe next winter, you won't have anything to eat. This is the way we're designed. We're designed to be able to accumulate during the good season, and when the bad season comes, we can starve and we can go on and on for weeks, for days, maybe on weeks without food. Our body is designed this way. So, but if we have high availability of protein, this is what happens: kidney overload, kidney damage. Standard doctor's advice: if kidneys are failing, just reduce the protein intake. By the age of 70, people lose about 30% of their kidney function, simply because the protein content is too high. Again, we come to the point that too much of anything is not good, and this is what we are seeing today in terms of pathologies and in terms of what is happening to people. People are overeating, and overeating on dairy product turns out to be fatal. Cheese is the most acidic food on earth, which leads to osteoporosis, surprisingly. We've been taught and indoctrinated that milk is required for children because that builds the bones. Milk, because of acidity, creates kidney stones. Parmesan is the most acidic food. Milk is very low in iron, which leads to anemia and iron deficiency. Also, bleeding in the intestinal tract. Parents will usually see this as blood in their kids' stool. No vitamin C, which means that there's very poor tissue healing. 97% of fats in milk are non-essential fats. So it's not the fats that we actually need, so not the important fats. There's a possible correlation between neurological disorders and feeding children too many dairy products. Lack of essential fats in milk leads to weakened nervous system in children. Milk was found to contain environmental contaminants like DDT and PCB, which might be a risk factor for cancer, Parkinson, brain damage, hormonal problems. Proteins in dairy products are highly allergic and a number one cause of allergies in children and adults. Autoimmune disease like rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, type 1 diabetes are initiated by the dairy protein. Milk contains 25,000 bacteria, which are specific for the cow. With milk, we are taking in all the bacteria which is specific for the cow. The most recalled products in the United States because of contamination with salmonella, staph, listeria, and E. coli. Bovine immunodeficiency virus, which was identified in the milk all over the world, and the bovine leukemia virus. So these are two viruses which have infected all cows in this world, with some small exceptions. And the milk industry doesn't do anything about this because they claim that these two viruses do not cross to human beings. In USA, 40% of herds and 60% of beef herds and 60% of dairy herds are infected with, so this is bovine AIDS basically. 89% have BLV, bovine leukemia virus. Canada, 70%, Argentina, 84%. These numbers are probably different right now, but I don't have the latest data on this. Finland was the only country which managed to eliminate both of these viruses, and it took them around 30 years. Most animals are usually slaughtered before they show any signs of these viruses. They don't live that long to even manifest the disease. Doctors say they don't know what causes the leukemia and lymphoma in humans. The dairy industry says these viruses do not cross over to humans, but studies have found BLV antibodies in 75% of people. So 10 of 23 human breast cancer cells were infected with BLV. Bovine immunodeficiency virus and leukemia virus, this is pretty much guaranteed to be in the milk that we'd buy in a supermarket. Milk is necessary for children. This is what everybody knows. People think that maybe I could give up milk, but children, they need the milk because that's just important for brain development. According to Dr. McDougall, the dairy industry teamed up with the schools. So they, as they say in their own documents, we have to guide school-age children to become lifelong consumers of dairy products. So they organize activities to target students, parents, educators, and school food service professionals. And because milk might be not interesting enough for kids, they are flavoring it with chocolate, sugar, and all kinds of additives. Massive promotions, millions of dollars to convince parents, schools, and everybody that milk is very important for children. Drinking milk has been traced to rhinitis, otitis, gastrointestinal reflux, asthma, eczema. Type 1 diabetes in children caused by cow milk protein. That's a study from American Pediatrics Work Group. Early exposure of infants to cow's milk protein may be an important factor in the initiation of the beta cell destructive process in some individuals. This is what causes type 1 diabetes. Studies on milk effects in children. They took a group of severely constipated children and put them off dairy products. 68% of children were cured. 12 months later, they put those children back on dairy products, all developed a constipation again. The science say, if you just Google for PubMed, you'll get to this site, which is the biggest repository of medical research. So if you search for tonsil enlargement, vomiting, ulcer, colic, stomach cramps, reflux, canker sores, cow milk, you'll find a lot of research on this. Bloody stools, painful defecation, chronic constipation, Crohn's disease, colitis, nasal stiffness, runny nose, otitis, sinusitis, asthma, arthritis, lupus, multiple sclerosis, headache, fatigue, enuresis, bedwetting, autism, iron deficiency anemia, nephrotic syndrome. For all of these conditions, there are medical papers which have established link between the dairy protein and all of these conditions. Milk versus meat. They have both similar amount of cholesterol. They have no vitamin C. They have no dietary fiber. Women are specifically targeted in milk ads and have a harder time getting off milk. And according to Dr. McDougall, milk is a health hazard. And he concludes that we are not cows Our children are not calves. They don't need cow milk. I do recommend everybody to watch the video, which is linked right at the beginning, right here. This is the link. Verdict. Cow milk is not recommended for children. It prevents healthy development of the nervous system and may lead to neurological disorders. Major cause of inflammation. Major cause of digestion and stomach issues. Key risk factor in cardiovascular disorders and cancer. The biology of fasting, Jason Fung, that I've already mentioned. Eating causes insulin to go up and to store sugar in the liver and produce fat in the liver. High insulin triggers is a signal for the body to store all the calories of fat. When we don't eat during fasting, insulin goes low, glycogen is burned. So we're burning the sugar and the glucose. When the body has nothing to eat, it takes fat from the store and increases the energy. That's what the studies say. During fasting, we do get more energy. But this is a little bit counterintuitive because during fasting, most people usually don't feel so great. So even though we get to the point where when we start to burn that energy, but because the body kicks into this maintenance mode, which means that all of the toxins which are safely hidden away in the usually in the fat tissue and wherever the body can hide them, all of those toxins are pulled out and they get into the bloodstream, and that's why we feel the symptoms of poisoning. But we do get increased energy. One thing which is important here to note is that 1 day fast is typically not enough in order to switch to ketosis mode. So in 1 day, I mean, if we do 1 day in a night, that's already enough because that'd be 48 hours. And that's already enough to kick that stage. But it usually doesn't last long with 1 day fasting. So 1 day fasting is great for healthy people, but for specific conditions when we want to get rid of certain things like poisoning or whatever, a longer fast would actually do a lot more cleaning because normally we don't get to that point where when the body actually starts burning the bad cells. I suggest everybody does their own study. Fast carbs versus slow carbs I already explained. There's a little bit more here that processed carbs as breads, these are, if eaten regularly, fast carbs can keep your blood sugar elevated, causing weight gain and risk of type 2 diabetes. And the most important thing about fast carbs is that they raise insulin very quickly, which is always a trigger for the body to store the food and to store the extra energy. Slow carbs, most vegetables, whole grains, seeds, nuts, beans, peas, and legumes provide your body with energy over an extended period of time. Fast carbs, this is heating ourselves by burning newspapers. Slow carbs, proteins and fats, that's heating ourselves by burning a big wooden log which lasts for the rest of the day. And again, of course, the food, the supermarkets, they don't want us to eat too much of this. They want us to eat this because then we'll keep eating the whole day. Legumes are not protein, they're carbs, but they happen to have a little bit more protein than rice or bread. So there's a little bit of data from Jason Fung, and he's showing how the growth hormone increases when we fast. And usually it takes more than 1 day. It depends on how much sugar and carbs we eat right before the fast. But he's showing that The first reaction that is triggered in the body when we fast is to grow new cells. And growing new cells, that's how we regenerate our tissues. And this process is kicked roughly after one day. In 1982, there was a study of a patient who fasted for 40 days. There were several notable changes. Blood pressure slightly decreased, glucose goes down, insulin goes way down. Glucagon, one of the counter-regulatory hormones, increased from 139 to 727 as expected. Glucagon, that's the growth hormone. 1000% increase in growth hormone during fasting. Mother Nature says, you don't have food. I'm going to make you even stronger so that you'll be able to go and find food. A report in 2012, which was prepared by 29 authors from 10 countries, 10 of them holding medical degrees, PhDs, three former presidents of the Electromagnetic Society. They have collected all these studies about the EMF radiation. They made a amendment for the FCC, which is the regulatory body in the USA, which controls emission levels. That has been submitted years ago, and it's been shelved. No action has been done on this. This is a very thorough study by scientists.
5G, escuchemos. Las amenazas que analizamos en esa la posibilidad que las máquinas puedan leer nuestro pensamiento.
So he's saying, what's the big advantage of 5G? And he says, it's the possibility that the machine can read our thoughts.
E incluso puedan insertar pensamientos, insertar sentimientos.
5G can insert thoughts and can insert sentiments. Quantum reality, biology of belief, Bruce Lipton, he concluded that all animals and plants communicate with vibration. All organisms communicate by vibration. Vibrations change the proteins in the body. All the waves together form the field. New physics focuses on fields and not waves, not particles. Fits what the Chilean president is saying, because he's also talking about EMF interfacing with the human body. In the same presentation, he is talking about how 5G is going to have a huge impact on medicine and remote diagnostics. Later in the same video, he says that 5G is going to become the actual nervous system of our society. Conclusion: perception controls biology. Our mind has power to actually change the molecular and cellular processes in our body. Perception controls genes, and perception rewrites the genes. Beliefs control biology. What this actually means is that whatever we buy into, whatever concept or idea we buy into, that is going to have an impact at the cellular level. If we buy into fear, that's going to have an impact on our body. Negative perception can kill you, the nocebo effect. Positive perception can heal you, the placebo effect. From the quantum perspective, nocebo and placebo is the way things actually happen at the biological level. Belief becomes a very important part of medicine. And this is actually a very difficult aspect, because beliefs is normally not something that we can change. For most people, beliefs are read-only. We as adults, we have bought into this concept that if we got to the age that we are now, it means that we're doing something right. It doesn't matter whether we are feeling happy or not, but for us, this is a proof that keeping it safe and not touching stuff which already works, that's the way to keep going. In order for people to give themselves permission to change that, they need some very significant boost. They need some kind of shock. They need some kind of trauma. They need some kind of big motivator, or they need to just be very unhappy about the situation they're in. But otherwise, beliefs are untouchable. Moreover, you'll probably notice that for some people, beliefs are even more valuable than their lives. Emotional detox. We're talking about the neuroplasticity and about how children survive when they grow up, children have a tremendous challenge. They are trying to figure out how to manage. They would accept anything as long as that would help them cope with the environment. They would sometimes go against their own will, or they would go against their own desires, they would go against their own dreams and goals. This could create a lot of suppressed feelings because as children we're not taught what to do with our feelings, so ignore them or hide them and deny them. This causes a rejection of a part of ourselves. When people say I cannot take this, it means that they literally see whatever is going on as something bigger than themselves and something which is too overwhelming, something which they cannot assimilate, digest, and transform in a positive way or in a useful way. The only remedy they have is isolate it, wrap it into a protective blanket, and just throw it into a dark room, which causes a split personality. If we do not accept it, we are starting to lying to ourselves. It's something we cannot take. So if we cannot take it, then what should we do? Deny it. And once we deny it, we're already lying to ourselves because we're saying this doesn't exist, but this actually exists. This creates a split personality, and this creates internal compartmentalization. We're taught to ignore, suppress, hide, and deny anything that is causing unpleasant sensations. This is what we learn as children. Typically, we'd have an idea of rightness and good, and we'll have a dark room where we store everything which we consider to be too much for us to take, so we just ignore it. How do we digest perceptions? When people say, this is more than I can take, it literally means that this is something they cannot swallow, they cannot digest. So how do we digest perception? Recognize and acknowledge the perceptions. This is a required step. Recognize and acknowledge whatever we feel. People would create some kind of numbness. They would make themselves numb so that they cannot actually feel their own perceptions. There's a conscious intent to actually not see, not hear, and not be able to perceive. Recognize that now we are at a step when we are finally able to do it, when we are finally able to see it from a perspective where we are bigger than this. Next step is actually name and define the perception. A necessary step, because unless we actually know what is there, we won't be able to see it. Just being able to name it is a link which can get us to the next step. When we define it, let's say I didn't want people to laugh at me. Maybe this feeling was so strong that it made me do things which I actually didn't want to do. Next step, fully allow yourself, we give ourselves permission to experience it and identify where exactly in the body we're feeling it. Only here we can face it. A lot of neurosis, a lot of neurological conditions are caused by the situation when we do not want to face what is there. I don't want to get into that because I'm going to explode. Here, we're allowing ourselves to explode, but we are exploding in a lab condition. So we're creating a special space where we allow ourselves to explode and we allow ourselves to experience all of these feelings. If that's explosive, we should allow it to explode. But instead of making it a nuclear bomb, we can do it in a lab without damaging anyone. Once we fully experience it, we penetrate it with our own consciousness, we're fully owning it and recognizing it as part of ourselves. Then we can transform it into free-flowing energy. We need to open it up and we need to unwrap it. And only then we can look at it and allow it to just dissipate. When it dissipates, it transforms into free-flowing energy. This is our own life force, which has been entrapped in a specific episode, incident, or belief, or whatever. That room where I'm hiding all of those things which I don't want to see, I can clean it up and I can use that space to build something. sleep. There's a TED talk by Matt Walker linked here. He's talking about lack of sleep. He says lack of sleep will make your body at least 10 years older. He's a neuroscientist. He says you need sleep after learning so that you don't forget. When we do not sleep enough time, we would not assimilate the information. Proper sleep works like the save button for the information. Without sleep, everything that we get, which might otherwise be useful, is going to be wasted because our brain is just incapable to actually save any of the knowledge we receive. We need to sleep after learning. So learning does not work without sleeping. It's during the sleep that that short-term memory gets moved over to the long-term memory, which we call knowledge or skills. There were research was going on in a person's brain during, before, and after learning. They also found that we need to sleep before learning in order to prepare the brain to receive the information. If we don't get sleep, we just cannot absorb new data. Here are the results of the study that they did. The green column is people who got enough sleep, and the red one are the ones who didn't get enough sleep. And this, the vertical, is how much of the information was retained. If you don't sleep, almost half of the information is just thrown away because the brain cells don't have the capacity to digest the information. Without sleep, very little information is committed to memory. They conducted an experiment, and in the sleep group, they noticed very, very high activity in the brain regions that move data from short-term storage to long-term storage. Physiological signature of aging: your sleep goes worse, and the quality of sleep goes worse. Sleep deprivation leads to cognitive and memory decline and higher risk of Alzheimer's. Sleeping pills don't help because they don't generate the type of sleep which is healthy. About sleep and immune systems, and here there's a correlation with something we talked previously. There are so-called NK cells, which are natural killer cells. These cells are very important because these are the policeman cells which work for our immune system. So these natural killer cells, they identify everything which is dangerous and unwanted, and they throw them away. The body is very smart, and the body is able to eliminate any kind of poisons. But we should allow it to do it. When you only sleep 4 hours, there's a 70% reduction in natural killer cells, which means that your immune system is severely compromised. Low number of natural killer cells also has been linked to higher risk of breast, prostate, and bowel cancer. World Health Organization classified any kind of 9-time shift work as probable carcinogen. The shorter we sleep, the shorter life is. Another study found that when we don't sleep enough, only 6 hours sleep, 750 genes were distorted. The genes switched off by lack of sleep, and those were the genes which are associated with immune activity. Sleep produces a change in how the genes are read. And if we don't sleep enough, the good genes are not read and the bad genes are read. So how to sleep better? Exclude coffee, alcohol, exclude daytime naps. Baba mentioned about this. He said that if we sleep during the day, we are going against the energy of the day, which is the waking energy. Biological field, they go in the opposite sense than the fields in the environment. When we sleep during the day, there's an interference because we're going against the field. When we are active at night, there's an interference because our field goes against the environment, which is resting. Go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time, including on weekends. Optimal room temperature around 18 degrees. They do say that there's sleep debt, and that means that we can pay it later. Actually, it doesn't work that way. If we don't sleep, we're just doing damage. The damage is done. We cannot pay it off later. Evolutionally speaking, our bodies were not made to be able to live without sleep. Our bodies don't have a mechanism to compensate for sleep deprivation. Our bodies have a mechanism to compensate for lack of food. If winter comes, our body has reserves and storage for a few weeks, probably months. We'd be able to survive without much problem. We're programmed to not be able to find food tomorrow. Biologically, we're prepared for that, but we're not prepared for not getting enough sleep. And one recommendation from this author is not to do any activities while we are in bed, not to do anything which is not sleeping. Turning off the Wi-Fi router when you go to sleep is one thing which everybody can do. We can put our mobile phones into airplane mode. Having those things on have a negative effect on the way we sleep. By initiative report, I've shown they have sufficient studies which prove that there's Wi-Fi, there are mobile networks, there's nobody knows what else, but there's a lot of EMF noise that makes sleep much worse, and people are not getting proper sleep because of that. The amount of radiation you're getting from your Wi-Fi router is exponential with the distance. If you are 1 meter away from your router, you're getting a lot of radiation. Having at least 3 or 5 meters, that'll be more safe. Our own routers, we can switch off. Sleep is not a luxury. Sleep is a biological necessity. It is our life support system. It is the most powerful elixir of life.